This time, where it all began with Sheffield FC, Liverpool showmen of 87-88 and how Liege changed the football market forever.
And it's no nay never, no nay never, no more, 'cause I'll stay a while drover forever and more. And it's no nay never, no nay never, no more, 'cause I'll stay a while drover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a football podcast where fans get to grips with the ultimate question: just who is the best football team ever? While we will, of course, be looking at the bare facts, trophies won and opponents beaten, we want to look beyond that. We'll be considering how teams played the game, the odds they had to overcome, and their longer-lasting legacies. Each pod will be making the case for three great teams. Some we all remember, some we've mostly forgotten, and some, as probably become pretty apparent very early on, we've never heard of. And together with a few guests along the way, we'll be ranking them in a bid to answer the ultimate question: who is by far the greatest team the world has ever seen? This week, we make the case for the most stylish Liverpool team of all. No, not Robbie Fowler and Jamie Redknapp in the white suits at Wembley, but the 1987-88 title-winning side. We also delve into FC Liege and how one man's determination to leave them changed football transfers forever. But where else to start but at the very beginning with Sheffield FC, the oldest swingers in town. And my name's Graham Dunn. Joining me, as ever, we have Jamie Rooney, and this week we have Scott Somenthal. Is that the correct pronunciation?
I'll take that. Thank you.
I've known Scott for a few years, and I've never known how to pronounce his surname. I've said it as Somenthal, I've said it as Somenthal, I've called him Mental. So I think he did a really good job for the first one.
There's quite a few, so Somenthal's a great effort.
In my research, it came up for something we'll be talking about later, of Ronnie Rosenthal.
I can't imagine what you're going to talk about, Graham.
Well, I mean, what else is there to talk about with the great Ronnie? Sheffield FC then. So why then, Jamie?
Well, I think to go back to the origins of the game and where it all began, it started in many places, but it started to take shape and formalize itself where the rules started to develop in around about the 1850s. And in 1857, Sheffield FC were formed, and they are officially recognized by FIFA as the oldest football club still actively playing today. And they do still play. I think they're in the seventh tier of the English football system. They've had very, very limited success in their footballing history. I think they've won a couple of little regional trophies in the Yorkshire area, but I think they've only won one trophy of note, and I think that was in the early 1900s, and that was the Amateur Cup. But why are we talking about today, and why are we putting them forward as greatness? It's not just because they are the oldest team. It's in terms of how they developed and extended the beautiful game effectively, and grew out of their Sheffield League, and they wanted to go on to challenge teams in bigger and better areas. And in 1866, they made the very long and costly journey at that time to London, to Battersea Park, to play a London team in what was billed as the first unofficial international, where a bunch of players from Sheffield FC took on a combined London 11 at Battersea Park.
I think many people from Sheffield would still consider a game in London as an international in many ways.
Well, I can't possibly comment on that. Sheffield United are doing fairly well at the moment.
Yes, they are.
Sheffield United, they didn't become Sheffield United on Wednesday. Sheffield FC are a team in their own right.
They are still playing. They're still playing. Generally, they play teams that were being developed in the Sheffield area, and they have this rivalry that goes back to 1860 with Hallam. Hallam and Sheffield FC was one of the big fixtures, and I think they still play each other today. I think they still kind of cross over in the league system. But yeah, Sheffield FC are their own team. They've got their own badge, their own ground. their own kit. And I think they're quite proud of that. And I think they've received an award from FIFA as well for recognition of being the oldest team as well. So along with Real Madrid. So they're in pretty good company. So to make the case for Sheffield FC, so they got this game in Battersea, and I think there's some fascinating things that were going on the side. Firstly, I mean, the game is being exported not just from Sheffield to London, but it's also being taken around the world at this particular point. I mean, we were right in the industrial age. We've got people migrating from the United Kingdom, and as they migrate, they're taking footballs under their arms, and they're sharing this game that until this point in the 1850s hasn't really had any defined rules. So you've got these multiple codes that are going on, and it's the reason why we've got American football in the US. It all comes from this period of where there were no set rules. It's the reason why we have Australian rules, as they still call it today, in Australia. So you've got Sheffield that are playing to their own rules, and they actually have their own rules. They're called the Sheffield rules. And they were in operation for a good 15, 20 years. And they try to push the FA, who create their own rules as well, to effectively use the Sheffield rules. But ultimately they lost to the boys from London, and then they had to concede and fall in line and play the game everyone else was playing at that particular moment.
I like the idea of bringing your own rules with you to the game. I mean, which something that I think Neil Warnock continued, and he was in charge of Sheffield United, I think, in many ways. But how did they... do you know how the rules differed from... I mean, it wasn't as extreme as, Aussie rules and American rules. I can't noticing they used their hands.
They did use their hands. They absolutely used their hands. They were allowed to handle the ball at the time, but they weren't allowed to carry the ball or throw the ball, which you generally would find in rugby. And again, this is where rugby and football are just slowly moving away from each other. And when we talk about the match in a minute, there's an interesting way of how they would have settled the match had it been a tie, which I'll come to in a bit. But yeah, if you like the fact they had their own rules, you guys might like the fact that they actually had games amongst themselves because they had no one to play. So the way they divided the teams, we've all been there, we've all been last pick and stuff like that when we've been picking teams. But they had a much more refined system. They would basically pick a team of married men versus single men, effectively. And that would be the game. I mean, if you got married at the weekend, you're transferring from one team to another.
Yeah, maybe there's people have to consider either, if you wanted to switch teams, it's kind of an incentive to get married, or maybe maybe there were some lengthy engagements.
Well, that's the thing with the rules. I mean, certain things were allowed, so infringements generally weren't punished. I think the kicking was outlawed at that particular moment, but you could certainly still be quite aggressive with your opponent. But get into some of the details of the game which took place. It's quite interesting because Sheffield themselves, they tried to push the FA to play by their own rules, and the FA pushed back and said, no, we'll have this game. We accept your invitation, because Sheffield were the ones that extended the invitation because they just wanted to kind of probably show the rest of the country that they were the number one team. This was the number one area where football was developing the best. And the FA pushed back and said, no, we've got our own rules, which incidentally, they only just developed two months before this game took place in March 1866. So these rules are pretty new, the FA. So obviously they're protecting their baby at the time. But some of the things are quite fascinating. So that was shared. There was no half times back in the day. So what happened was when a team scored, both teams would change ends. So there was no half time. The game was 90 minutes, but if you had 6 or 7 goals in the game, you would be changing ends after every single goal.
I like that. And there have been many, probably less so in the professional game these days, but back in the day with the oval sloping pitch or parks football, I mean, that would make which end you played made quite a significant difference, didn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, which way is the wind blowing? And that's how you decide kickoffs, really. Do we have the wind in the first half or the second half?
To your point about the rules, so was this game played under Sheffield rules or FA rules?
FA rules. So the FA won that battle. They decided so what Sheffield did, and that was my point I was leading to, they accepted this, and then they spent the week before travelling down to London playing and practicing the FA rules. So they were preparing themselves for the game a week before, playing rules that they hadn't really played before. And now there's not a massive amount of difference in the rules. There was some differences around offside. We talked about handling. One of the key differences was the Sheffield rules, you could head the ball, which I think the FA allowed in for this particular game.
It caused a bit of a stir, though, didn't it? I'm to understand. All the teams on the other side are just wetting themselves, apparently.
Absolutely. They're like, you got these guys that have come down from Sheffield playing in London, and they're actually using their head. You know, it's football. We call it football for that reason. But yeah, I mean, both of the heading game goes right the way back to that point as well. And yeah, people were just giggling away watching these guys nut the ball.
So that was the main difference then, was it, in the two rules?
No, there's a few other differences. I think they're the key ones. But one of the interesting rules that was only in for a short time, and this is really about the game now. So just, to draw out the drama, the game finished London 2, Sheffield 0. And by all accounts, it was a pretty one-sided affair. So Sheffield, bless them, they even though they practiced, they hadn't won. But in brackets, if you look at the game, you'll see in brackets 4-0. So London 2, brackets 4, Sheffield 0, brackets 0. So the brackets is actually touchdowns. It's called touchdowns, and it comes from rogues, effectively. So again, this is where the two games of rugby and football are like confusing one another. But effectively, what you could do, this is brilliant, because this is predates penalty kicks. So this was used to decide how games in cup competitions, if they were drawn, would be decided. So you have a winner. So you don't have this endless replays. So London had 4 touchdowns, and to win a touchdown, if the ball crossed the goal line of your opponent, the first team to touch the ball would be awarded a touchdown, effectively. You could be in the corner flag of your opponent's area. You could deliberately kick the ball out. It's going to be a goal kick, because there was no corners back in that day. The corner kick didn't exist. And you could effectively touch it, and you've just won a touchdown for your team. Which brings me back to the whole idea of Sheffield had this rule, which wasn't in the FA rules but was introduced for this game, how the London team dominated. So they must have been practicing this touchdown rule and, the early form of tactics potentially coming into the game.
So Sheffield weren't exactly the best team in the world at that stage then, Jamie. We put them down as one of the best teams in the world, and they got stuffed 4-0 in touchdowns and 2-0 in real terms.
It's a fair point. It does make my argument for Sheffield being one of the greatest football teams of all time pretty weak. I think they're great because obviously they're one of the earliest teams ever, and they got bored of playing teams from Sheffield and they wanted to go elsewhere. And I think they just saw it as a lads' weekend. They just kind of thought, well, we've got an opportunity to go down to London, guys. We can have a game. It's like, so I think the fact that it's not just that we owe them as well. After the game, both teams went back to the pub in Covent Garden for drinks and socialising. It's like all the things that we've seen and experienced as, part-time footballers goes all the way back to this particular period. In fact, even the 3 p.m. Saturday kickoff, this game was a 3 p.m. Saturday kickoff, and we still to this day have that. So there's so many things that were in this particular match that we still relate to.
The 3 p.m. Saturday is incredible. Presumably, up and down the country, people weren't able to watch that as one of the live games because it was the 3 p.m. Saturday kickoff. If only. If it had been the Sunday game or the Friday night game, it would have been different.
Sky would have been there with their cameras.
They were also responsible for the growth of the FA Cup, Jamie. Now, I know you were talking about 67, so forgive me because I'm moving on a little bit, but it's all to do with Sheffield FC. But I read somewhere that in 73 they played in the FA Cup and got to the quarter-final, but it was down to them that the FA Cup grew in size. Again, I don't know if that's true. I think it's true. But,
you're ahead of me in the research, mate. Yeah, I haven't seen my research hasn't gone that deep in terms of their participation. The FA Cup would have started in 72, so I think 1872. So it would have been 6 years prior to this event. But yeah, absolutely, I can see why the game would develop in that sense. You've got all these teams that are popping up all over the country that want to have organised football. It
is strange, isn't it, that they should. But the two other Sheffield clubs should go on to such, rich histories. I mean, it's very true. They must feel a bit hard done by, but I guess they become, and still going now, still playing now.
7th tier of the English League pyramid. Yeah, I think it's the Northern Premier League, but.
Absolutely. So the thing we are going to be doing on this pod is attempting to rank these teams in terms of their greatness, and greatness is embodied by so many different things, whether it's kind of games won and honours won and style and legacy and so forth. We've got one of the greatest right at the top, down through to true greats, touch of greatness, edge of greatness, and then right down at the bottom, the not so great, or as we call it, a blinkered great. Those who are great in at least some minds or another. And we're the self-appointed arbiters of greatness, which is what I like. We are the ones who get to decide this.
As your guest, can I give my first opinion? I'm throwing the guest card on the table, if that's okay, and then you can just tell me to shut up and go on with with what you're going to do. So listen, if you're happy for that, I'm going to go mid-range.
Mm-hmm.
And for a number of reasons, actually, because again, Jamie, there's a couple of firsts that are really key to this football club. They were also the first team to play under floodlights in 1978 against Sheffield United at Bramley Lane.
Is that 1978 or 1878? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, 1878. Yeah, sorry, 1878.
1978 doesn't sound. Yeah, 1978 isn't so impressive.
You'd like to think we'd had floodlights by there, wouldn't you? 1878. So this is a great club for a number of reasons. I mean, one, that they started the game of football, which we all love and adore, which is just fabulous. They obviously weren't a good side because they got beat quite regularly. But that aside, they obviously started lads' weekends. They're obviously organised to go for beers after a game, which again is so crucial when you're playing football. I mean, how many times have we all been to the pub after a game of football? It's part of society. It's part of our ethos as footballers to go to the pub after the game. So I think that's huge respect on its own.
Yeah, I mean, I'm loving the floodlight fact. I had them on edge of greatness, but that floodlight for me, that's just yet another first. I think that tips them into touches of greatness. So it's kind of there are there's just those flashes of greatness. I would be happy with that one, Jamie. Where are you landing on this one?
Well, I mean, if you're both going for touches of greatness, it's almost redundant. Well, I've got to think about this, so I could say anything right now because 2-1 is going to beat me, right? So, well, I was thinking of greatness because, there's a lot of key notes in there, but I mean, the social points that Scott picks out in terms of going to the pub after the game and doing the tours away. I mean, this is just the fabric of not just the professional game, but the amateur game. In fact, that's probably the prime reason why we play the amateur game because, we get that social kick. So I think I'm going to stick with Edge of Greatness, but I'm very happy to concede to both of you with Touch of Greatness.
I've got a couple of other facts that I'll throw in. May take them a little bit further.
But you've won the argument.
Go on.
Interesting. So they had a player called Sir Charles Clegg, and obviously Sir Charles was, loved by all the team, and he was known as the Napoleon of football, and he is apparently one of the greatest club pioneers.
4'2".
I haven't got his height.
Sorry.
But apparently he played his first international in the England v Scotland game in 1890. No, sorry, in 1872. Forgive me. The other fact is 1890. So in 1872, England-Scotland. So again, what a great history that game in itself has. And the Napoleon of football, Sir Charles Legge, starred in that. And then in 1890, he became the chairman of the FA. How cool is that? So, not only was he part of the first football club, he played in the first international and became chairman of the FA. So I'll leave you to rate that.
Is he any relation to Nick Clegg, who I think was Sheffield and Hallam for a fair while?
Yeah.
He went on to become the first Graham Kelly.
Bless that man. Did he ever smile?
I would pay good money to see Graham Kelly doing the FA Cup draw on the One Show now. That would just be too special, wouldn't it?
Graham Kelly on the One Show doing the FA Cup draw would be priceless, yeah.
Case closed for Sheffield, and a good one to get us going with. We're sort of moving now to an era which we'll have all ourselves remembered and watched. And, I mean, this is the Liverpool team of 1987-88. And I suppose for full disclosure here, Jamie, you're a little bit up against it. Scott is a Liverpool man, and I was working the Liverpool thing out of my system by that stage. They were my childhood club, and I'd moved. As luck would have it, that particular team had a couple of players from the side I went down to follow. So I was trying to think as to why that 87-88 team stands out, because that was Liverpool's 9th title in 13 years. You know, they just won the league every year. They won it over and over. So it is incredible how that team stood out. And I think it's about, certainly to my mind, they were the first stylish, swashbuckling team, certainly of the eras that I'd watched. We become a bit used to it when you're watching Man City play, win titles the way they win, and a lot of teams the way they've won it. But that team played with a style that I don't think any previous Liverpool team ever had.
Well, listen, I'm a Liverpool fan, so I appreciate what you're saying. They had some great style, without a shadow of a doubt. But the Liverpool teams, for me, always had great style. And unlike you, Graham, I stayed being a Liverpool fan. And the fact that you've just told everybody that was watching this podcast that you've changed teams, you've just lost the huge respect of the audience. So...
or gained. He's gained potentially.
Or gained.
Who do you follow now, Graham, before we go to dive further into this amazing team?
I then started, because I can go to games, you wanted to go and watch games, so the team I'd go and watch was Oxford.
Who were you supporting in 87-88, Oxford or Liverpool?
I'd gone to Oxford by then.
Yes. So you were obviously gutted that John Aldridge came to Anfield and then scored about 26 goals that season.
He did. It was it's incredible. I mean, Aldridge, when he joined, and there was a bit of a Liverpool tradition there, that they had been a long time tradition where they would sign players and they would ease them in, which they did with Aldridge as well. Partly, obviously, because they had Rush still at the time, and they'd signed.
He had Phil, didn't he, with Ian Rush? I mean, what Rush had delivered was incredible. So to come in, from Oxford and fill in, Rush's boots like he did was just incredible.
And I kind of remember this from the time that Aldridge, he scored in his first, the season that Rush left in 87-88, Aldridge scored in the first 10 games. He scored 11 goals in 10 games. I mean, let's ignore that 7 of them were penalties. That's another story. And of course, the only
penalties a bit later in this conversation, because obviously he's famous in this season for missing the very, very famous penalties. But until that penalty miss at Wembley, he had been, scoring every one. I don't know if he had a 100% record, but his record was.
I think the Wimbledon was the first one he missed.
Yeah, what a time, what a gutter.
And the extraordinary thing with Aldridge was, of course, that not only did he replace Rush in terms of the goals, he obviously looks exactly like him as well. He was kind of remarkably similar in playing style, in look.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. Maybe that's what Dalglish loved about him, the fact that he had the same sort of physique. And he wasn't as quick as Rush. I think Rush was a faster player than Aldridge. And Rush just lived off his speed, didn't he, really? I mean, he was just so quick, especially over those first sort of 4 or 5 yards. He was phenomenal. And I don't think Aldridge quite had that, but I mean, what he delivered to Anfield is just phenomenal. And only 2 seasons, really. Sadly, he left. He scored 22 seasons. I know we're talking about 87, 88, but the following season he scored 22 goals in the league. So he scored 26 this season, 22 the following season, and then they brought Rush back from Juve. I believe that was the reason that he left. Why would you let him go, though? But I think Rush started to score again, and John, fell down the pecking order behind Ian Rush again. So up sticks and went to Spain.
Ian Rush falls into the bracket, especially as you said, he was really quick, because in that classic normative determinism, he is his name, which is probably good quality to have, isn't it? Although it doesn't always fade. I can think of there probably are some players that have the name that probably doesn't do their performance justice in terms of.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure David Speedy was.
I set them up and you bat them away, Graham. I'm quite happy for that. I probably don't have the same affinity as you two over this team because they were going head to head in the league with the team that I followed at that particular time, and I still follow now. And yeah, as a kind of youngster, the rivalry was growing. So I probably didn't fully appreciate that team then as much as I do now. So when I reflect on it now, I absolutely do appreciate some quality players. I mean, Beardsley and Barnes in particular. I think it was the season that they came as well. I think that was their first season.
Yeah, what's extraordinary about it is, and Liverpool have when they sold Torres, and the money they spent on that was kind of 50-50, wasn't it? They bought Carroll and Suarez, and one of those looks a better signing than the other. But Liverpool spent that. They spent the 3.2 million or whatever it was they got from Uwe for Rush on Barnes, Beardsley in the summer. They'd already bought Aldridge, and then they bought Houghton, and that's an entire front four who just came in. They basically replaced the front four of the previous year, and just in an unbelievable fashion, the way that took hold. So, I mean, Houghton came in, I think, in kind of October, November, which always feels a bit odd hearing now when you hear people coming in.
It is, yeah.
You can't sign someone in October, November. That's weird.
It's really bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that the key for me is, so when you think about Houghton, sort of semi-replaced Craig Johnston, and they seem quite similar players, very busy, both classic tidy wide players, and Aldridge very obviously was very similar in replacing Rush, and Beardsley and Dalglish are quite similar in terms of that creativity. The real difference was that John Barnes replaced Ronnie Whelan on the left, isn't it? It's kind of, I mean, that's a real change of style and player, isn't it? I think maybe that's why they had that extra swagger about them. I think Whelan moved more central, didn't he? But he'd been playing on the left before that, and Barnes was like an unbelievable player who I'd sort of forgotten how long he was there. He was at Liverpool for years.
Yeah, a decade, well over a decade. I was watching recently the Liverpool-Newcastle 1996 game, first of the 4-3s, and John Barnes set up Stan Collymore for the winner. And Rush played in that game as well. Rush came on as a sub. So, yeah, I mean, that was in 1996, that game. So, that is a decade later.
It really is, and it's fascinating that you're talking about that front line. I mean, it's brilliant business. It was Dalglish was the manager at the time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
It's a brilliant bit of business because you lose Rush, and he's getting you 30 goals a season, and you replace the effect of 30 goals with 4 fantastic players and some, and you're taking them on another level. But it's fascinating that you're talking about this attacking unit, where I always remember the defensive unit and Lawrence and Hansen, and it was just like. They were just a Rolls Royce of a centre-back partnership. And then I think in those games as well, correct me if I've got this wrong, but I'm pretty sure Jan Molby played a part, and he kind of played in that space between the midfield and the attack. And, that barrel-chested elegance that he had on the ball. He just had such qualities player. But it's interesting that you talk about those attacking players, and Jan Molby hasn't even come into it.
Well, the other person you're missing in that midfield, I mean, you're talking about Jan Molby and his physical presence. And I loved watching. What I loved about Jan Molby is people would come and just bounce off his chest and just fly like 2 or 3 meters in different directions. But you're also missing Steve McMahon. Oh my God, Steve McMahon is one of the original sort of. I mean, if you look at Roy Keane and what he did for Man United, Jamie, if you want to sort of talk about United, I mean, McMahon was that sort of player where he didn't care who he was tackling. He would go in feet flying, which you could probably do a bit more then than you can now. And you didn't mess with Steve McMahon. Probably following on. And he was that sort of guy as soon as sort of.
I'm just going to have to come in on that. You wouldn't mess with Steve McMahon, and I generally agree. But I'm pretty sure it was that season in the FA Cup final where Vinnie Jones decided, I am going to mess with Steve McMahon. And that incredible tackle, I don't know if you recall where. Vinnie Jones had no interest in the ball and just absolutely went right through the back of McMahon.
At least Steve McMahon could play football as well as kick someone's ass. I mean,
I agree.
Jones, God bless him. God bless him. Yes, I think you're right. I mean, I don't know if he scared the life out of Steve McMahon. He definitely scared the life out of some of the Liverpool players that day because we
scared the life out of me watching it. It was terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, he some of the things that Vinnie Jones did. Let's talk before we get to. Let's not talk about Vinnie Jones and the FA Cup final too much. Let's talk about the 29 game winning run unbeaten run, which is one of the first really good unbeaten runs for Liverpool for sure. And again, we talk about the greatness of a team. Obviously, talk about losing great players, replacing them with great players, and Graham, you obviously mentioned about what great football that team played, and they did. They played absolute, possibly total football. Certainly, the 5-0 against Nottingham Forest was a game that was held.
I watched that ahead of this because in my mind, I remember that game so well.
Yes,
and Beardsley was extraordinary in that game. He was brilliant. What I'd forgotten, two things. That it was the third time they played them in 11 days by the time they'd done it.
Yes, and they lost 2-1 with that 2 weeks before, hadn't they?
So by that stage, Forest were absolutely sick of the sight of them, I guess. But also, Forest were third in the league. They were. Yeah. They were a genuinely good side in that era. So
there was a huge rivalry between Liverpool and Forest. Jamie, you and I talked about that a couple of days ago. We got wasn't it? And the fact that they had around Europe and the European Cup and that sort of thing. So to beat them 5-0 was just incredible, and we just destroyed them that game. It was a total footballing game. Liverpool had been dominant in that decade. And I think that's a fair point, Graham. You say, they started to, maybe that was the year where they'd started to, with the likes of John Barnes, and were showing themselves as just a complete team. And that 5-0 for Forest, I think that stands out with most Liverpool fans as just at that time one of the best games.
29 games unbeaten, winning the league at a canter. That is the sign of a great team. But actually, in honours won, the Liverpool had won the double like 2 years before. And yet, that team, I kind of don't remember. Whenever I think of Liverpool in the 80s, I go straight to that 87-88 team, which, ultimately, they could have won the double probably 2 more times that side, but for last-minute issues.
The other double we lost was the following season when we lost 2-0.
Michael Thomas.
Yeah, who then joined Liverpool later in his career and scored in the FA Cup final against Sunderland and won 2-0. I mean, you couldn't write that 2-0 victory for Arsenal. I mean, that was incredible. I think Liverpool might have been, and I know we're going into another season, I don't know whether they were complacent. I don't know if you'll remember this, either of you two. Liverpool were 19 points behind Arsenal at Christmas that year.
I remember that.
And they obviously made up those points difference and then went into that final game, ahead of Arsenal on points and goal difference. And the rest is history. And I hate talking about it, really. But we would have done the double that year as well. But anyway.
I think there's a pretty good documentary on that on Sky. It's told from an Arsenal point of view. And I think, definitely when we start talking about the glorious Arsenal team of 89, then we can definitely bring that back in, I think. That would be good fun. 87-88. Let's go back to that. So a couple of things that stand out for me, which I think are crazy. So 90 points from a 40 league game season. I mean, that's the equivalent of what we're seeing Man City do right now, year in, year out. And it's extraordinary. It's incredible that a team can reach 90 points, but to get to 90 points in 40, of course, absolutely, yeah. And Liverpool, my apologies for my blinkered recognition of who's great currently. Through gritted teeth, I say them both. But I mean, I just think it's an incredible amount of points, and it's I can't fully remember the quality of the league back then, but I seem to think that football was a lot more difficult then because things were more spread out than what they are now, and you haven't got the dominance of what effectively we have as a big four, a big six. Back then there was no real big four, big six. The teams would just pop up from small places and challenge for a league title. Watford did it a few years before, coming second or third in the league. Everton won a couple of championships in that period as well. And then you also had that period where you had teams like Wimbledon who were able to win the FA Cup. And so it felt like football was a bit more balanced back then. So 90 points, I think, is incredible. Not so incredible, and more curiosity, and probably not reflected on Liverpool's greatness of that time. Do you think it's possible that the invention of the third kit came around about that season? Because Liverpool had this incredibly beautiful grey kit as their away kit, and it pains me to say incredible, beautiful Liverpool kit, but I remember that grey kit with the red stripes, the Adidas. It was a beautiful kit. But I'm just thinking, I mean, it's not evident and we haven't looked at their away record, but could they potentially be lost? The players were getting lost in the crowd when they were playing. and therefore the great kit was to blame for some of the bad results that they had, and therefore they had to bring a third kit, and that's where they went to yellow the season afterwards. Maybe I really don't know whether that's possible, but I like the idea that that's where the third kit originates from.
Yeah, you might be right, Jamie. I mean, Man United had the same issue, didn't they, really, with the grey kit a few years later. We can change ours at half time, though, apparently. We kept it on.
Well, you haven't got third kit to change into. That was my point. So, and another player we haven't mentioned, who I do remember from that team, is who retired at the end of that season as well, was Craig Johnson. He went on to invent he was the creator, I think, or the inventor, or credited with the Adidas Predator football boot. Yeah, he did a lot of research. I think he was literally he was sellotaping rubber to his boot to prove the concept. And I think he went over to Germany to, argue the case that this really works. You can get more power and swerve. But he was a good-looking player, wasn't he? I mean, he had the long, flowing hair, and he played wide as well. He was just a nice, lovely footballer to watch.
Yeah, he was outstanding. He had a great career at Anfield, and you're right. He created the Predator. That team had so many great players. We haven't talked about Alan Hansen, Bart Lawrenson,
that's
Leige, obviously. I know, it's incredible. I mean, Alan Hansen is potentially one of the all-time great defenders. What he was doing in that team, we talk about the Rio Ferdinands of the world being able to carry a ball out of defence. He was doing it 30 years ago. I mean, it's just incredible. And they also had Mark Lawrenson, another great defender.
Highly successful Oxford United manager, of course, who, of course, resigned over... There's 1 degree of separation, unfortunately, on it, because otherwise it'd be perfect. He resigned when Oxford sold, when one of the Maxwells, unbelievably, out of all the... this is for another episode of the pod. I could go through the checkered history of Maxwell's at Oxford, but which has got unbelievably even worse than I thought it could ever get. But he resigned when Robert Maxwell's Derby bought Dean Saunders off Kevin Maxwell's Oxford. And then, obviously, Dean Saunders went on to Liverpool in the early 90s, I guess.
He did, yeah. I don't know what year, actually. I'll have to look that up. But no, another great player for Liverpool. He scored abundance of goals as well.
I think we are approaching wrapping up point, but I do want to... Now, you may all know this. I discovered this fact, and I think this is extraordinary, and I can't believe I didn't know it before, but you may all know this. Peter Beardsley is, as far as I know, the only player to have played for Liverpool, Everton, Man United and Man City. It is extraordinary.
He played for Man City.
He played a League Cup game for United at the start of his career, and he played 6 games on loan when Man City were in, maybe first division. I don't know whether they were that's the current first division or... But yeah, so there's trivia fact question for you to trot out at Christmas. Which player is the only one to have played for all 4 of those Liverpool Manchester clubs? I mean, by that, we're ignoring Tranmere and Rochdale and all the others. But yes, we come on to the rankings. I think we know where Scott's going with this. Are you going to surprise us?
Is it too predictable? Remind me of the top ranking again, Graham. I can't remember what that one's called.
He doesn't need to hear anything else on that point.
One of the greats. So I suppose. So would you? Okay, here's the way of twisting the question for you. Would you have them as one of the greats of Liverpool teams, or is there a Liverpool team you'd put ahead of this one?
Oh God! I mean, that's an impossible question. That's an impossible question because you've got now. The thing is, though, we're talking about a season, okay? And when you talk about great teams, you generally sort of talk about them over a period of time. If you talk about a great Liverpool team, the 80s, absolutely. I mean, 3 European Cups, untold league titles, absolutely one of the greatest teams there has been. And this season of this team is in there. And as we've just sort of fleshed out, they've managed to sell some great players and replace them with 3 or 4 great players. So I think this 87-88 team was a great team within a great era of Liverpool because, we dominated the 80s. We'd done the double, we'd won Europe, and we won the league titles. And this is obviously before the Premier League. And, Dalglish was just a complete genius as a player and a manager. I would say this is a great team. 87 was an exceptional season. The problem, again, that's hard to quantify this team against another team is because we weren't in Europe. And, obviously Heysel was a couple of years before, and Liverpool had a 6-year ban, and English clubs had a ban. So that's the challenge. When we talk about Man City at this moment in time, everyone's argument about why Man City isn't a great team is because they haven't won a European Cup. Would have this Liverpool team in 87, 88 won a European Cup? We're talking hypothetically, aren't we? No one knows. Potentially, yes. Yes, I think it's a great team. I think it's a great team within a great era.
I think it's my role to, play devil's advocate and come up with, one reason why they may not be great, okay? And you're either immediately going to go with me on this or you're going to defend this. But, of course, probably the most noteworthy thing of the Liverpool team in the 1987-88 season is the Anfield wrap. So that is the Anfield wrap. Depending where you stand on that either seals one of the greats or it tips them out of the top bracket. I think it might tip them out of the top bracket for me. Jamie, where do you go?
Well, I mean, the Anfield wrap is a brilliant shout. And do you know who actually assisted in writing the Anfield wrap? Our man who invented the Predator Football Group, Craig Johnson.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is.
He was just a man of many talents. He really, really was. I think it's so difficult, isn't it, really? So for me personally, 29 games unbeaten at the start of the season is incredible. 90 points in a 40-game season, a plus 63 goal difference. Some sexy players that even as a United fan, I have to recognise were pretty nice to watch. Lots of them were really nice to watch, and they did play good football. The European Cup thing is a really good point, actually, Scott. PSV won their one and only title. PSV Eindhoven won their one and only title in that particular season, and they beat Benfica in the final. And I think, as we're going to explore on future pods, there are a number of English teams that could have potentially done some things in Europe, and we'll never know because that's not the way that things worked out. But I think it's a good shout. I think this Liverpool team would have gone on and potentially challenged quite seriously for the European Cup. They'd been there. They got the T-shirt. They had the experience, and I think they would have probably put up with a fight. So I think they are one of the greats.
And even I have to confess that the Anfield rap is actually one of the best football club songs as well of the 80s, sadly. So I think even on those grounds, they see that.
Hold on. What about Aussie's dream? We're missing out on Aussie's dream here.
It's a unanimous decision. It's the ultimate.
It's the top tier. One of the greats.
Fabulous.
I look forward to next week's pods. We can have another team to knock them off straight away.
Yes.
Well, the Liverpool team of 2019-2020.
No, I don't think we're going to be just sitting Liverpool
could be
for a few weeks again.
Yeah, so what hope, Jamie, is there that FC Liege of Belgium, why are they great?
Well, Royal Football Club of Liege at the time in 1990-91 were playing in the top division in Belgium. They were on the rise at that particular moment. They'd never really been a massive club. They'd won a few things in the 50s and 60s. I think they were fairly big then. But then since the mid-90s, they'd just fallen between the second and third tier of the Belgium league pyramid. I don't think it's their football that puts them in greatness. They did win the cup competition. They're one and only time they've won the Belgian Cup in that season. And whilst there may be some people who are followers of RFC Liege, Royal Football Club Liege, which would say that is a great team, and they probably would be right. I wouldn't dispute that. The reason why we're calling them out is because of their actions that happened in that season. So they had a player playing for them called Jean-Marc Bosman, and I think we're all familiar with Jean-Marc Bosman. His contract had run down. He was effectively out of contract, but through the hold and control, retain and transfer system that was in place at the time, they were entitled to keep hold of him as long as they wanted, even though he had no contract. Dunkirk came in to make an offer. The offer was refused, and Jean-Marc Bosman decided he was going to take the club to court on their decision. And it got a bit messy from then on. So it's probably one of the most significant things that has ever happened in football, that a player has taken a team effectively to court over a ruling of them being retained by the club. And we all know that it led to a radical change. So the reason why I'm saying they should be on our list of greats is because I'm sure a team would have been the Liege, the Bosman, but they were the Liege and the Bosman. And it's their actions through Jean-Marc Bosman that effectively turned football into a completely different game. I think it opened up the quality across Europe, because not only did he get the freedom of right to move, the court case also abolished 3+2 ruling that was in place at the time, which meant that as a team, you could only play 3 foreigners plus 2 affiliated players that had been at the club for, I think, 5 years through the youth system. So it revolutionized the whole game effectively. And it's the game that we got now. And it's why the Premier League is so glorious as it is right now. It's because of the Bosman ruling.
And I still remember having gone from never having heard of Liege, let alone Bosman, that suddenly overnight it became, which is a rare thing handed out for footballers, that they become a verb. So to do a Bosman suddenly was something everyone did. And you can only think of, in the same way as Paninka or Klinsmann, doing a Klinsmann, that's a verb, I guess, as well, the big dive. But Bosman absolutely changed everything at a stroke.
He really did. And there were so many players, so many agents that gained and benefited from doing a Bosman, but Jean-Marc Bosman wasn't one of them. He effectively, because he refused to play, over that 5 years, the club reduced his salary by 75%. He had marriage problems. He turned to alcoholism. Yeah, he basically never really played football ever again. He was a 25-year-old lad, just wanting to play football. Yeah, a fairly creative player, fairly tidy player, from what I've learned. Quiet guy. But by this monumental step of taking his football team to court because he just wanted his freedom of choice, which I think is a basic right, really, was never going to play the game again. And it would change his life radically, but it would absolutely bring incredible riches to so many others. I mean, if we look at one of the most recent and famous Bosmans is Lionel Messi, moving from Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain. I think he got 25 million euros for signing on, and he gets paid 25 million euros per season he's there. I mean, it's just untold riches. Lionel Messi has benefited from the pain and hardship that Bosman would have gone through in order to allow players to have that freedom of choice.
I mean, I was thinking with Bosman, was the transfer worth it? Was it worth haggling so much for the Liege? Did that change their, was he that important to them? Seemingly not.
Well, there's a documentary that David Gilliner did a few years ago. It's called Bosman, where he goes to Belgium and he visits Jean-Marc Bosman, who's living a kind of recovery life. And at the end, he asked him that question. And incredibly, he goes, yes, I would do it again. And it's like, but you can see he's almost thinking, but people need to give me, 10,000 euros every time. It's like, why aren't they donating to me? It's almost like he sees this entitlement that, and maybe he's right. I don't know that, if it wasn't for me sacrificing myself, you guys wouldn't be enjoying all the cake right now. Give me some cake. It's incredible. I think he would do it again based on that documentary.
Ideally, he needed someone else to do it before him.
He was the trailblazer, and we need trailblazers in football, and he was the one, and he sacrificed himself. He really did, which is incredible, which makes him a great in my eyes. Whether that makes Liege's actions, contributing to that as a great is another question. But it's quite interesting, though, because he wasn't the first. So we can go back to the late 1950s, early 60s. There was a player playing for Newcastle United, George Eastham, who would be selected in England's World Cup 1962 and World Cup 1966 winning squads. Never played a game in either World Cup. So he's a pretty tidy player. He fell out with Newcastle. His contract was up in 59. He decided he wanted to move. He was also, and this is really a sign of the times, he had a grievance with the club because the house that they put him in wasn't up to scratch. He didn't like the house that he was put in. Also, he didn't like the conditions of his second job. And this was a thing back then in football. Footballers had to do second jobs because the maximum wage cap was in place at that particular time. So footballers weren't earning that much money at all. You know, they don't have anywhere near the riches that we've talked about with Messi just recently. So they had to supplement their income from football by doing second jobs. Eastman didn't like his second job, so he went on strike. He went down south and took a labourer's job or a trader job, whilst his lawyers took Newcastle to court under the retain and transfer policy because it was unfair that his contract had expired. He didn't think it was right that Newcastle hold on to him. He wants to move along. So it didn't take 5 years. It only took a year for this to go through. And the court ruled on side of Eastman. He got some money back in terms of court costs. And the club were then in a position where they had to transfer, and they transferred into Arsenal. So this whole idea of players going against their clubs effectively predates Bosman. But Bosman was the one that really kind of kicked the whole thing into a different world.
Yeah, even then, nothing. Bosman was a landmark thing, but it wasn't enough to solve Pierre Van Hooydonk's problems a couple of years later at Nottingham Forest, causing him to go on strike, and in fact, as we've seen, several other players to go on strike. Player power might be back, but it hasn't changed it totally, has it? Maybe the legacy's not totally there.
Well, I think there's pros and cons for definite. You certainly can see that the game has improved because obviously teams have been able to change and improve their quality. But you have to feel sorry for the guys now because there's players, male and female youth players that are just let go at the end of the season. So whether they're in contract or not, because that's the right of the club. Just going back to that documentary, and one of the most famous ones, ties us into the previous team that we were talking about. Steve McManaman moved from Liverpool to Real Madrid in 1999. He went on a Bosman. And he went on to win the European Cup a couple of times. And, he's absolutely loved by the Madrid fans. And he's a big pundit on TV now. And he's done well for himself. But at the same time, another player for Liverpool was effectively released to go on a Bosman, Rob Jones, who was a tidy right back, a good right back, but then struggled to get a club. Yeah. So this whole scenario where you've got McManaman who goes on through Bosman for riches and Jones who's effectively struggling to get a job. The pros and cons of Bosman.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? That losing McManaman was a gut. It was a real gut.
You just can't stop talking about Liverpool, can you? You just can't stop it.
You brought it up. It was just really disappointing when he left, but what a fantastic job he did at Madrid, yeah. But there's been lots of players that have been on strike. I mean, Van Hooijdonk, as you rightly say, Graham, was probably one of the famous. But I think, didn't Mahrez do it once when he was at Leicester?
Yeah.
Carlos Tevez go on strike? I'm just trying to round my brains now. I've got...
I think Carlos Tevez went on a golfing tour that just coincided to be the same time he should have been playing football.
Yeah.
You need an antagonist in the story of greatness, and they play that role. And I don't have any ill feeling towards Liege. I think it's just a sign of the times. Every club was doing exactly what Liege was doing at that particular moment. They were totally within their rights to refuse the transfer, and they were totally in the rights to retain Bosman. But it just seems incredible that it took 5 years for that to resolve. And it's just sad for Bosman that, that was the end of his football career and there's a deep demise for him. But Liege is a great football team. I'm clutching at straws here. We've got the Bosman angle. We're looking at their actions. Probably more what they did with Jean-Marc Bosman than winning the Belgian Cup. But hey, they won a Belgian Cup. So that's pretty impressive. That took them into the Cup Winners' Cup at the time.
So I think Liege's presence in football history is clear. Are they a great team? Scott, what do you consider the ranking for Liege?
They won the cup, as Jamie said. We're clearly talking about great football teams. There's not enough evidence for me on Liege to put them up above Sheffield FC, for example. There's
obviously
much more...
They won less than Sheffield FC.
Agreed. So probably I wouldn't put them on the edge of greatness. I think they play a big part in the history of football, massively so. And if that plays a factor into their greatness, then, so be it, really. They changed football, and as Jamie's point, for the best, because players, because of the Bosman ruling, were able to move more freely. Were they a great footballing team? Not really. I mean, they won the Belgian Cup, which is great, but they didn't do anything in Europe. Yeah, we're clutching at straws, to Jamie's point.
We are. Yeah, when you said were they a great football team, I was waiting for a not for me, Clive, not for me. Give us a full.
I think they kind of sit somewhere between the edge of greatness and blinkered greatness, or maybe even a bucket that we should crate for. Not really a great, but worth talking about.
That's
definitely, they're definitely in that bucket.
Yeah, and exactly the way they broke the mould for football, they're breaking the mould for our ranking system by not fitting into any category at all. We're going to create a new one for them.
It's perfectly fit in, isn't it? Yeah. So not a great, but worth talking about. That's where RFC Liege of 1990-91 belong.
So, Scott, it's been great having you joining us this week on this one. We have one last bit of business we try to do on this, which is to sort of consider the three teams in the round, but to, how best to consider them. As a football fan, if you had the time machine, this weekend you could go and watch one of those teams play live for yourself. Who's it going to be?
Oh, wow. It's only going to be... You don't really need to ask me that question, do you, really? But it would absolutely be the 87-88 Liverpool team. And if you could take me back to that Forest game, I'd be really grateful.
That would be the one. For me, it's got to be Sheffield. It's got to be the turning up and playing. Turning up. It's travelling all the way down to London. First time heading out to they've all agreed to head to the Ye Olde Tavern or whatever the local pub is called at that stage after the game. And they turned up. The managers persuade. Yeah, we've got this game. We're going to go down to London. You're going to spend 3 days travelling down. All these bits and pieces. Oh, by the way, we're going to play some different rules. You know how you can pick the ball up. Oh, you can't now. That for me is great. That I would love to see that. I'd love to see that.
I'd love to be in the changing room when they pick the team and the manager going, right, we're going to pick the teams now, boys. Any of you married? Who's married? Who's single? Right, single over there. Get your blue shirts on. If you're married, go and get your red shirts on. Absolutely. You can take me back to that moment.
Jamie, what about you?
Divorce if you want to blend the singles. I'm with you, Graham. I think if you want to watch Liverpool 87-88, we've got YouTube for that, and we can watch them on YouTube anytime we want. So they're there. Their place in history is secure in terms of visual references. I mean, there are no visual references with Sheffield FC. And to go back to the beginning of time to watch football as it was then would be incredible. I mean, there are no pictures. Photography wasn't even a thing back then. In fact, the only pictures you've got is some bloke who's on the side who's sketched what's going on effectively. And that's your only visual reference other than having these second-hand accounts that have been passed down for over 170 years. For me, it's a no-brainer. I can watch Liverpool 87-88 on YouTube. I cannot watch Sheffield FC from 1866. Going back to the origins of the game would be where I would want to be going this weekend in that time machine, Graham.
Good plan.
Graham, I'm disappointed with you considering the links to Oxford United. I thought you'd want to go back and see some of your old boys.
Not after I watched them on Tuesday night.
Yeah, having a tough season, aren't they, really? But yes. Look on the bright side, you could be a Milton Keynes fan.
Definitely. Scott, Jamie, thank you both. That's all we got time for this time. Please get in touch with any comments, additions, corrections about any of the teams you talked about today. We'd also love to hear from you from any suggestions you've got on greatest teams we should cover. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you again next time.